This looks really formal, but just relax. I'm going to get through this as painfully as you guys are. So this is the 2018 Faith and Finance report for CBC. And in this report, this presentation, these slides, what I hope that you'll get out of this is that you'll see how God provides for us. You'll understand how we use the resources that He gives us. And we'll look forward and see what the next 12 months looks like. But I also want to unpack sort of two areas for you. And that's related to the whole complex word that I used before. And that's related to staffing and to facilities. So here we go. As I've thought about this idea of faith and finances, I've been thinking, what would it look like to align our finances to what God is calling us to? So what would it look like to align our giving and our spending to our vision? I don't do that perfectly in this presentation today, but hopefully you can get a little glimpse of we're moving in that direction. And I'm trying to bring these two ideas together, faith and finances. So as I mentioned, it is a little bit complex. Our next slides will have two organisations. So at CBC we have one vision, but we have two organisations. Another way of saying this is that we have two organisations but one community. So how does this work? Well, CBC you probably know a bit more about. CBC has those things in it, our Sunday worship and our children's and youth ministries, etc. But it also has like our Latino faith community and our partnership with Thailand in there. If we then move over to Agora, what does Agora do? Remember, Agora is our community trust that CBC has established. What's sitting in there is the cafe and the event centre. But it also now funds and operates a large part of our community work and our support work for the migrant and former refugee community here in Hamilton. So there's a bit of a split there. There's one organisation is doing one thing, the other one's doing the other part. So together, these two organisations serve the community of Hamilton. Both are part of who we are. Both are an expression of what we believe and think is important. Today I'm just going to focus on the CBC aspect of this. So we have 4 sources of income at CBC. There they are. So these are the numbers. If we add up all these numbers here, they come to $339,000. That was our income for the financial year just finished in March. You can see the largest amount, the blue area, is our general giving. That made up 81% of our total income for the last year. This is by far the most important part of the CBC income, because this is the regular amounts that come in from you and from others each month, each week. Okay? The one-off gifts, that's the yellow area, that makes up 12%. Now this is the one-off irregular gifts, so it's a little bit hard to budget and plan for these, but they do come in. And you can see in the last year, they made up $42,000. And actually $22,000 of that actually relates to Project Watertight, which is what I'm going to talk to you about a little bit later. Fundraising and grants. So that $10,000 that you can see, what colour is that one? Orange, okay. That is our Yellow Pages fundraiser. So you can see $10,000 for all that work that we put in for Yellow Pages. That actually contributes a lot. And it's a lot of fun to get out there in the community and run around. So that's Yellow Pages. And Agora also features. Agora is a new source of revenue for us in the last couple of years. So in the last year we've received $12,000 from Agora, and that is a payment from them for rents. So because Agora shares this building with us, where they now make a contribution towards that in terms of a rent payment. In the past, you will know that CBC has put a lot into Agora, and now Agora is starting to give back to CBC. So that's a really positive thing. So these are the ways that God has blessed us and resourced us in the last year. So let's move on now to expenses. How did we use that money? This is it here. So the biggest block is what colour? Pink. And what is that? Internal. So what is internal? Internal makes up 47% of our total spend in the last year. It includes things like Sunday morning, children and youth ministries, small groups, pastoral care, etc. So anything that's sort of internally focused on CBC. The next biggest area is the blue box, which is what? External. So you know how I talked about I love CBC, we're so externally focused. How much is that external percentage? 23%. That's actually, I would suggest to you that's quite high for a relatively small church like us. And that's our focus on mission, community and the world around us. The green area, 15%, that's our facility costs. So that's a total of $48,000 in the last year. That's what it costs us to run and own and maintain this building here, 13B Kent Street. It includes things like electricity, rates, insurance, repairs, and the cost of having the mortgage on the property. Finally, operations. That's operations and administration, and that includes things like internet and the phones, vehicle, equipment, audit fees and photocopying. So what I want to highlight to you here is really just what I said before, that we have a strong focus on being externally orientated, and you can see that in these numbers. And that's a distinctive of CBC that we really want to continue. Now, some of you may have noticed something a little bit strange about these numbers. What's missing? You might have wondered, where are all the staff costs? It's a good question, so let me now explain what that looks like. Thanks to Campbell for this great graphic, isn't it cool? Although I don't think we'll be wearing ties to work anytime soon. Maybe if Campbell does, I will, but I can't see that happening. So, in the last year, our staff costs totaled $206,000. That's the sum of these three numbers here. But what we've done is we've split the staff costs, not to hide them, but to actually orientate them towards our vision. So we've split them into internal, external, and operations. And when we do that, we get quite a different picture. So it tells us that 65% of all our staff costs are related to internal. 25% is focused on external, and the rest is operations and admin. So the second thing I want to tell you now is this: if we look at the little men and ladies, how many men and ladies are at the top? 7. So we actually have 7 staff who work for CBC. But remember how I said things get a bit complicated? So if you take myself, for example, I only work 20 hours a week, but I actually work sometimes half of that time for Agora. Victoria is the same. She is employed by CBC and she works half her time for Agora. And then we have 2 staff members who are employed by Agora who do work for CBC. And one of those members actually gives her time for free to CBC. So when we nail that all down and consolidate it, that actually only translate into 4 full-time equivalent people. And if we look at the colour coding here, you can see 1, 2, 2.5 of the little men are pink, which is internal. So 2.5 out of 4 people are internally focused. The orange, that's probably majority of me, but it's also a little bit of others. And you can see we have 1 whole person dedicated to being externally focused and mission. Now that's not just necessarily one person, but it's a mix of all of us. So does that make sense? So that's why you might think we have lots of staff, and in one sense we do, because it is a complex place, but actually we are trying to work out how we best use those staff members based on where we feel God is calling us. So now that I've given you a brief summary of what last year looks like, 2017 and 18, let's now jump forward to next year, which is the year that we're in now. Actually, very little is going to change in the year ahead. So I'm not going to show you a whole lot more graphs because they'll look pretty much the same. But I do want to focus on one area that is going to have a significant impact on the year ahead. We will be working hard to keep our admin and operational costs at 15% of our expenses, and also our internal ministry costs at less than 50%, so that we can focus more on some more strategic things. So let's have a look at this key area, and it is our facility. Have you ever, imagine with me that this is Agora. Have you ever seen Agora so colourful? It's not going to be the new paint scheme, don't worry. So let me just explain 2 things related to our facility. The real cost of owning Agora, and secondly I want to highlight that these costs are potentially going to go up in the next year. So firstly, the real cost of owning Agora. In the slide I just showed you a couple back, I said that the cost of owning and operating this building here, 13B Kent Street, was $48,000. But actually that's not quite true. In the year ahead, it's going to be $57,000. So there's an increase in our budgeted cost for owning this building. And it's a mix of what you can see here. See the roof? It's 2 colours, and that relates to the utilities, so things like electricity, insurance rates. And you can see that cost is actually shared between CBC in the pink and Agora in the green. So Agora is actually contributing utility costs to help us pay for the costs here. But anything below the roof, that is the cost of owning the building. So that includes principal and interest payments. At the moment we have a mortgage on the building still of about $346,000, and we pay off about $20,000 to $24,000 of principal each year. So when we pay the costs, we pay a little bit of interest and mortgage, and that's reducing our debt to Stewards Foundation, who we borrowed from. So the net cost to CBC of owning this building is $74,000. So that's the sum of all these numbers here, less $17,000 that we get from Agora. So the real cost of owning this building is $74,000, but actually CBC only has to pay $57,000 in the year ahead. Now, do you remember back on the first slide when I talked about our sources of income? There was a source of income from Agora, and that was the rent. So we receive a rent payment from Agora, and some of that money will be used to go towards the interest and principal costs here. Okay guys, you're doing well? We're getting there. So the second thing I want to tell you about the facility is that, like I hinted at, the costs are potentially going to go up in the next year. And that's because of something called called Project Watertight. So in the spring of this year, probably October, November, we hope to be completing Project Watertight. And it's called Watertight because on a day like this building leaks. Some of you have experienced it. It leaks everywhere, it leaks onto the electrical equipment. So it's time for us to actually make this building watertight. And we've known about this for quite a while, but now we feel like it's really time to get onto this. Mr. Simon Warnock is leading this team. He will have more details, but we also want to give you more details later on as the time is right. But for now, I want to just highlight that the project will involve replacing the whole roof, repairing some of the windows, and a complete repaint of the building so that it's watertight. The total cost of the building is expected to be $140,000. Now that is a big number, but this is a great chance for us. This is a challenge for me. How can we combine our faith with our finances and see what God can do? Because this is God's building. This is God's facility, and we're just His stewards of what He has. So let's just see what God can do with that. The good news is that we already have $22,000 in the bank towards this project, so we're well on the way to getting this project underway. So what we're hoping to do is raise all of that money. If we don't raise all that money, then we're going to have some ongoing costs that we're going to have to meet each month, which are reflected in these numbers. So we'll have an increase in our mortgage costs because we'll have to borrow some money, but we're hoping that we can raise all the money and then our ongoing costs will be less. So let's try and wrap this all up a little bit now. We're almost at the end. It did get a little bit complicated. Just one more slide to show you on the numbers. So in 2017-18, we had income of $339,000. We had expenses of $316,000, which has left us with a surplus of $23,000. Now, if we're moving forward and looking at the next 12 months that we're in now, we're estimating that our income is going to be $309,000. Now, that includes just the regular giving. And our income from Yellow Pages and Agora, which we can reasonably predict, does not include any one-offs, because we just don't know about that. Our expenses are up slightly because of the facility costs, which are budgeted, which if we have to borrow a little bit of money. What that does is it leaves a shortfall of $30,000. And this is what we are calling unconfirmed or unknown yet. So that could be made up by one-off gifts as they come in, or it could be made up by an increase in giving. We're also doing quite a few funding applications to try and get some grant money in to subsidise some of the community work that we do. So that's the picture going forward. I'm wanting to give you really good information, not try and hide anything. This is our best guess of what the next 12 months looks like. And it gives us a chance to then see what God wants to do among us. So, it's something that we invite you to be part of. In summary, I just want to tell you what I've talked about today, that we have one vision here at CBC, to be a growing multicultural community. We want to align our finances with our faith. This means continuing to grow in what we do and trust God that He will provide for us as we do. We don't want to shrink back, we want to keep growing. In the year ahead, our facility is a major project that we're working on. And it does have an impact on our finances. And as a result, we have opportunities for me and for you to get involved.